They say grief has a way of drawing people together, of binding hearts in shared sorrow, making strangers into confidants. But what they don't tell you, what no one warns you about, is how that togetherness can start to shift, to warp into something unfamiliar, something you never intended to feel. It's been a year now, one whole year, a year since I stood there in that cold, gray cemetery, draped in black, the weight of my little one's hand in mine. And as I stood there, my heart in pieces, watching the love of my life, my husband, being lowered into the earth, I remember every single moment of that day as if it happened only yesterday. The wind was sharp, almost biting, carried with the scent of freshly turned soil, and it seemed to whisper the words I couldn't speak. My daughter, barely old enough to understand, looked up at me with wide eyes, her small voice trembling when she asked, "Mommy, is Daddy just sleeping?" I wanted to shield her from the truth, to tell her that this wasn't sleep, that it was something far worse. But the words stuck in my throat, and all I could do was hold her tighter. And then there was Daniel, standing beside me, as he always did, his steady presence a comfort in the midst of my chaos. His hand brushed against my elbow, as if to steady me, and I remember the way he studied me, the way his eyes seemed to search me, search for something I didn't even know I was hiding. He had always been there, my husband's best friend, my own quiet, unobtrusive support. But in that moment, I didn't realize how much his gaze could hold, how much it could stir in me. What I didn't expect, what no one could have prepared me for, was that a year later, I would find myself standing on the edge of something I couldn't explain, looking into Daniel's eyes, feeling something shift inside of me that I had no business feeling. It wasn't a single glance, not one stolen moment. It was the weight of his silence, the deep, unspoken connection that neither of us could deny anymore. And the most terrifying part? I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't ask for this. I didn't plan for it, for this confusing pull between grief and something else, something that felt far too dangerous to acknowledge. If you told me a year ago, standing at my husband's grave, that I would find myself thinking of Daniel in ways I shouldn't, ways that went beyond the safety of friendship, I would have called you insane. I would have sworn you were out of your mind. But here I am, unsure what's right, what's wrong, and whether the heart can grieve and want at the same time. Grief, it's a beast of its own making. People tell you it hurts, that it'll break you, and you brace yourself for that agony. But no one prepares you for the hollowing, the emptiness that settles deep in your bones, like a cold that won't leave. It doesn't just leave scars. It leaves vast, yawning spaces, empty pits where something used to be. And when you're hollow, when you feel like you're nothing but a shell of the person you once were, you reach for anything at all, that might fill you up again, that might bring some sense of warmth back into the dark, even if that warmth burns. I know what you're thinking. You're already making judgments, already placing blame. But let me say this, I'm not proud of what I'm about to share with you. I wish I could say that I made all the right choices, that I followed the path of virtue, that I stayed above the messiness of it all. But that wouldn't be the truth. And sometimes the truth is too complex, too tangled to be pretty. If you ever lost someone, really lost them, you might know what I'm talking about. You might understand the hollowing, the way their absence echoes through the silence of your home. You might have laid in bed at night, your hands brushing against a pillow that still holds their scent, the lingering reminder of what you've lost. You might have smiled at your kids during the day, trying to hold it all together, only to find yourself quietly weeping in the pantry at night. Because in those moments, you can finally let go. You let the grief hit, without the walls up. You break, and then you rebuild. But rebuilding isn't as simple as it sounds. Sometimes you're left with fragments, shards of who you were, and in your desperation to feel something, anything, you make choices you never thought you would. I don't expect you to understand right away. And honestly, I don't even understand it all myself. But maybe, just maybe, if you've been to that dark place where the grief pulls you under and nothing makes sense anymore, you'll get it. You'll understand why I did what I did. This isn't about making excuses, about painting a picture of a heroine who was just a little misunderstood or lost in the fog. This story isn't about justification or redemption. It's about moments. Small moments that seem insignificant at first, moments that might even appear innocent, but slowly, Imperceptibly, they pull you into something you never expected. They wrap around you, and before you even realize what's happening, you're caught in something bigger than you ever intended. Because what do you do when the only person who makes you feel alive again is the one person who should be completely off limits? What do you do when the person who holds your broken heart together, even in the smallest way, is someone you know you can't have, someone you shouldn't want? So, if you're looking for a neat, perfect love story where everything ties together in the end, where the characters are all virtuous and their choices always lead them to happiness, let me be clear, you're not going to find it here. This is messy. This is complicated. This is real. It's raw and painful, and it doesn't come with easy answers. It doesn't have a bow tied around it to make you feel good at the end. But maybe that's what makes it real. Because in the end, we all have our moments, the ones that shape us, the ones that leave us questioning everything we thought we knew about ourselves, and the ones that haunt us long after grief has faded. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that this happened, and I'm ready to tell it. Not for pity, not for judgment, but because someone out there needs to hear it. Someone who feels alone in their shame. Someone who's been carrying a secret in their chest that's too heavy to breathe through. So settle in, turn off distractions, and listen closely. Because once I start, you won't believe where this goes. Subscribe to Daily Stories 68. These aren't just stories. They're confessions, lessons, and warnings wrapped in raw emotion. I'm 32, and I don't remember the last time I felt like myself. Everything about my life before the accident feels like it happened to someone else. Someone who laughed more, slept better. Someone who didn't flinch when the doorbell rang or break down while folding laundry because she found one of his old t-shirts buried at the bottom of the basket. I wasn't just grieving a person. I was grieving a rhythm, a routine, a future that would never happen. My husband, Mark, he was a good man, stable, reliable, but somewhere along the way, before the crash, we stopped seeing each other. Not because of anything dramatic, just life. He worked long hours, always tired, always distracted, and I just kept things running. Got the kids to school, handled birthdays, dinner, bills, everything. We were a team, but the kind where you pass the ball, not the kind where you look each other in the eye. And then one phone call. It was raining. I remember that I was in the kitchen. The baby was crying. Dinner was burning. And then my phone rang just once. And everything was before and after that moment. The police officer's voice. The way he said accident, like it was just a word. The way my knees gave out. The way time stopped and never really started again. After that, I moved like a ghost. For the kids, I smiled. I pretended. But inside, I was stuck, numb, tired, hollow. That's when Daniel started showing up more. Daniel had always been around. He and Mark had been best friends since college. They played basketball together, went fishing. He was the best man at our wedding. He held our son the day he was born. After the funeral, he stayed behind when everyone else left. He didn't ask if I needed anything. He just did things. Fixed the porch light, took the trash out, brought groceries, played with the kids when I couldn't get out of bed. And at first, it was comforting. Having him around felt like clinging to the last piece of Mark I had left. He knew him. He remembered the little things. He didn't flinch when I brought up his name. I didn't think much of it then. I was surviving one day at a time. Cooking, crying, wiping noses, paying bills, pretending I was okay. But Daniel, he saw through all of it. Sometimes we'd just sit in silence. He'd bring a bottle of wine. We'd talk about Mark, or just sit while the kids watched a movie. And slowly, I noticed the air between us shift. He started staying later, coming more often, not just when things needed fixing, but just to be there. He started noticing things, when I hadn't eaten, when I hadn't slept. He noticed when I wore makeup again for the first time in months. He noticed when I cried quietly in the kitchen while washing dishes. He started asking deeper questions. How was I, really? Did I feel lonely? Did I ever wonder what life was supposed to look like now? And then one night, he said something I'll never forget. He looked at me, eyes soft, voice low, and said, "You don't have to be strong all the time. It broke me because no one had said that to me. Not once. Not since the funeral. Not since before he started seeing me. Not just as Mark's wife. Not just as a grieving mother. But me. And I don't know when it started feeling different. Maybe it was when he remembered how I took my coffee. Or when he fixed the broken drawer in the bedroom without me asking. Or maybe it was the way he looked at me when I laughed. Like it was something precious. Like he hadn't seen it in a long time. Something was shifting. At first, it felt safe. Familiar. Like I was waking up after a year of sleepwalking. But there were moments, little things, when our hands brushed, when he'd hug me goodbye and hold on just a second longer than usual, when we'd sit too close on the couch, when I'd catch him watching me, and he wouldn't look away. I tried to ignore it, told myself it was my imagination, that I was just lonely, that I was reading too much into kindness. But I wasn't, and deep down I knew that because Daniel had stopped looking at me like a friend, and I had stopped looking at him like one too. It was a Friday evening, one of those rare nights when everything felt light. The kids had begged for spaghetti and meatballs, and I didn't have the energy to argue. So I poured them juice in mismatched cups, let them eat on the couch while watching cartoons, and told myself I was doing okay. Daniel came over just before sunset. He brought garlic bread from that place Mark used to love, and a bottle of red, wine we never opened. Dinner was warm, not just the food, the atmosphere. The kids were giggling. I was laughing. Daniel had this way of making everyone feel like things were normal again, even when they weren't. He helped me dish out plates, sat with the kids, made them laugh with those silly impressions he always did. For a moment, just a flicker of one, I forgot how broken I'd felt for the past year. I felt like a woman again, not a widow, not a mother clinging to the edge. When the kids finished and ran off to play, Daniel stood up and started gathering the plates. "You cooked. Let me clean," he said, already walking to the sink before I could argue. I followed him into the kitchen, the room still humming with quiet laughter from the other side of the house. The lights were dim. The sun had just dipped below the trees outside the window, casting everything in this soft orange hue. I picked up the wine bottle, poured 2 glasses, and handed him one. He smiled, took a sip, and started rinsing the plates. I dried. It was quiet, comfortable, but there was something else underneath. A charge, like the air was too still, too full. Our hands brushed as he handed me a plate. Not on purpose, not exactly, but it lingered, his skin against mine, just long enough to notice, long enough for my breath to catch in my throat. I didn't pull away right away. Neither did he. We both looked down, then up. Our eyes met, and it was like the world slowed down just for a second, just long enough for everything I'd been trying to bury to float to the surface. The loneliness, the ache, the terrifying, quiet hunger for connection. I looked away first, laughed a little, nervous, said something stupid about the sponge being worn out. He didn't respond. When I glanced back, he was still watching me, not like a friend, not like someone doing a kind favor, but like a man who saw a woman standing in front of him. Not a widow, not a mother, not someone broken, just me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt seen. It was innocent, or at least that's what I told myself. A shared moment, a warm kitchen, a hand that lingered too long. That's all it was, right? But my heart was racing. My skin felt electric. And when he looked at me, there was something behind his eyes I couldn't ignore anymore. He finished rinsing the last dish, wiped his hands on the towel, and said softly, "You're doing amazing." It wasn't the words. It was the way he said them, like he meant them in ways he couldn't say out loud. I smiled, forced, uneven. He stepped closer, just slightly, not too close, but close enough that I could feel the heat from his body. And then the front door slammed. The kids. Laughter erupted from the hallway. A toy hit the wall. Reality rushed back in like a wave. Daniel stepped back. I turned to the counter, picked up the glasses. We didn't speak about it. Not that night. Not the next day. But something had shifted. I knew it. He knew it. There was no turning back now. After that night in the kitchen, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Not the touch. Not even the words. It was a look. That look he gave me. The kind of look you only get when someone really sees you. Not out of obligation, not out of pity, but with curiosity, warmth, want. And I hated that I noticed, because I shouldn't have, because I was supposed to be grieving, because I still slept on the side of the bed some nights, just to pretend I wasn't alone, because there was a framed picture of our wedding on the hallway shelf that I still dusted every Sunday. But I couldn't lie to myself anymore. Not completely. Something inside me had started to wake up, and it terrified me. The next morning, I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my robe, coffee gone cold in my hand, and stared at the floor like maybe it would give me answers. I felt his presence everywhere. Mark's jacket still hung by the door. His shoes were in the closet. His razor in the bathroom drawer. His voice echoed in memories that showed up uninvited. The way he used to say, "Don't wait up." The way he'd walk past me in the kitchen without touching me, without noticing. He loved me. I know he did. But toward the end, he was distant, always working late, tired, distracted, and I told myself it was just stress, just life. But if I'm being honest, really honest, I had started to feel invisible long before the accident. There were nights I'd lie awake next to him, staring at the ceiling, wondering if he even saw me anymore, wondering if this was what marriage was supposed to feel like. Familiar, quiet, lonely. I stopped bringing it up because what was the point? He always said he was just tired. But now Daniel was here, and he wasn't tired. He was present. He was attentive. He asked me how I was and waited to hear the answer. So I started rationalizing. He was just helping. He was just being kind. He was doing what any good friend would do. But there were little things I couldn't ignore, like the way my heart fluttered when I saw his name light up on my phone, or how I started wearing mascara again, only when I knew he was coming by. I caught myself putting on perfume before he arrived. I'd stand in front of the mirror and whisper, "It doesn't mean anything." But it did. It meant everything, because I hadn't felt wanted in so long. And then came the guilt. It hit hard. It sat heavy in my chest, like a stone I couldn't cough up. I'd walk past Mark's photo and feel like it was watching me, judging me. I'd sit in the living room with Daniel, laughing about something one of the kids did, and then suddenly feel sick, like I was cheating, in a way that had nothing to do with bodies and everything to do with hearts. I tried to pull back, tried to cancel plans, tried to tell myself I was imagining it. But then Daniel would text something simple like, "Need anything from the store?" And my fingers would move faster than my brain. "No, I'm okay, but you can still come by if you want." I started waiting for his visits, planning dinner around when he might stop by, wearing that blouse that made me feel like a woman again, not just someone's tired mother. And then I'd feel disgusting for it. I'd sit on the bathroom floor after everyone was asleep and cry quietly into a towel because I didn't know what I was doing, because I missed my husband, because I was angry at him for leaving, because I felt something I didn't want to feel. Was it wrong to feel again? Was this betrayal or survival? Was I trying to fill a hole that could never really be filled? Or was I finally letting myself breathe? The war between my heart and my head was constant. 1 minute, I was telling myself I was just grateful for the help. The next, I was sitting too close to Daniel on the couch, laughing a little too hard at his jokes, catching my reflection in the window and seeing someone I hadn't seen in a long time, someone alive. And that scared me more than anything, because I didn't know who I was without the grief anymore. And I didn't know if I wanted to find out. After that night in the kitchen, something shifted in ways I couldn't take back. Daniel started coming over more often. At first, it was small things, bringing over extra groceries, picking up the kids from school when I was running late, staying a little longer after dinner. Then it became routine. He fixed a leaky faucet in the bathroom, hung new curtains in the living room, repaired the old bookshelf Mark started and never finished. He moved through the house like he belonged, like he'd always been there. And the strange thing was, it felt natural. The kids adored him. They started calling him Uncle Dan, without me ever suggesting it. He'd build Lego towers with my son and braid my daughter's hair better than I ever could. He knew their favorite bedtime stories by heart. They laughed louder when he was around, and I smiled more. I told myself he was just helping, that he was just stepping in where life had left a gap, that we were just two broken people trying to make the best of things. But even I didn't believe that anymore, because the tension between us never really left. It just waited. One night after the kids had gone to bed, I opened a bottle of wine. It had been a long day, one of those days where everything went wrong, and I just needed someone to talk to. So I texted him, "You up?" He was at the door in 10 minutes. We sat on the back porch, sharing the bottle between us, wrapped in a blanket of soft night air and memories we hadn't said out loud in a long time. We talked about Mark, not in a heavy way, but in the kind of way you talk about someone you both loved. Stories from college, stupid things they used to do, moments I've forgotten, moments that made us laugh and cry at the same time. There was a pause, a long, comfortable silence. I looked down at my wine glass, and when I looked up, Daniel was already looking at me. He reached for my hand. I didn't move. He just held it. Not tightly, just enough. Enough to say everything we'd both been avoiding. My breath caught in my throat. My heart thudded, so loud I was sure he could hear it. I pulled my hand back slowly, not sharply, not with anger, just enough to say, "Not yet." But I didn't tell him to leave, and he didn't. He stayed for another hour. We didn't touch again. We barely spoke, but everything had already been said. The next day, the kids ran into the kitchen shouting, "Uncle Dan is here," like it was the most normal thing in the world. And somehow it was. He'd become part of us, part of the house, part of the rhythm. But my chest felt tighter every time he walked in. I'd catch him glancing at me while I made coffee or brushing my shoulder as we passed in the hallway, and the air would hum with unspoken words. One afternoon, we were rearranging the living room, something I had mentioned in passing. He showed up, toolbox in hand. We moved furniture, left. Then, as I stood on a chair trying to adjust the curtain rod, he stepped in close, too close. He studied me with both hands on my waist. And when I looked down, his face was right there, just inches from mine. Our eyes locked. The air between us thickened. He didn't move. Neither did I. I could feel his breath on my lips. But before it happened, before we crossed that line, I looked away, stepped down, mumbled something about needing to check on dinner. He nodded quietly, didn't push, but the weight of that almost moment hung in the room long after he left. The next few days, I avoided him. Didn't answer his texts. Didn't open the door. When he dropped by, I told myself it was for the best, that I needed space to think, that I needed to remember who I was and what I owed to the past. But the silence didn't bring clarity. It just made me miss him more. Then one evening, just as the sun dipped behind the trees, I opened the door to find him standing there holding flowers. He didn't say anything right away, just held them out, soft eyes still willing to wait. I took them, tried to smile, but my throat tightened. He stepped forward just slightly and said, "I know what this looks like. I know how it feels, but I'm not trying to replace him. I'm just trying to be here for you." I didn't have words. I just nodded, stepped aside, and let him in. It felt wrong. So wrong. But it also felt like I was being seen for the first time in years. And I didn't know what scared me more, doing something I couldn't take back or living the rest of my life pretending I didn't want to. It happened on a Thursday. The sky had been moody all day, gray, unsettled. By evening, the wind had picked up, and the first crack of thunder rolled in like a warning. The kids were already tucked in. We'd lost power just before bedtime, so I lit candles, pulled them close, and told them it was just a little storm. Nothing to be afraid of. Daniel had come over earlier to drop off a flashlight. He stayed. We sat on the couch, wrapped in the dim, flickering glow of candles. The house was still quiet in that eerie way only storms can make things feel. Rain tapped steadily against the windows. The wind held outside, but inside it was warm. Too warm. He handed me a blanket. Our fingers brushed. I didn't flinch this time. I didn't pull away. The silence stretched between us. Not awkward, just full, like both of us were holding back words neither of us wanted to be the first to say. And then he spoke, soft, measured, but every syllable landed like thunder. "I've been in love with you long before he died," he said. "I just never had the right to say it." My heart stopped. The room went completely still. For a second, I thought I hadn't heard him right. Or maybe I wanted to believe I didn't. But he was looking right at me, eyes wide open, no fear, no hesitation. I couldn't breathe. My throat tightened. My mind raced, trying to hold on to something solid, something familiar. But there was nothing, just the weight of those words and the truth I've been avoiding for far too long. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. I should have said no, should have asked him to leave, should have reminded myself that this was wrong. But instead, I whispered, "Why didn't you ever tell me?" His answer was quiet. "I didn't want to be the reason you broke." And just like that, I did. I don't remember who leaned in first. I don't remember how it started. Only that once our lips touched, something inside me crumbled. I felt everything at once. Guilt, hunger, relief, grief, desire. Like all the pain, all the loneliness, all the years of being unseen had suddenly found an exit. His hands cupped my face. Mine trembled on his chest. And when he kissed me again, I didn't stop him. I let it happen. I let all of it happen. We didn't speak. There were no explanations, no logic, just bodies pressed together in the dark, guided by emotions too big to contain any longer. It was slow, intense, desperate. It wasn't just about sex. It was about being touched, about feeling wanted, about not being alone in the ache for just one night. And in that moment, it felt like the storm wasn't just outside. It was inside me, and he was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. But morning always comes, and with it, the light. I woke up to tiny footsteps down the hallway, the sound of my daughter's voice calling for me. Panic surged through me like a jolt. I sat up, sheets tangled, heart pounding. Daniel was beside me, still sleeping, peaceful, too peaceful. I pulled on my robe, rushed out to meet the kids in the hallway before they could come any closer, guided them gently to the kitchen, started breakfast like nothing had happened, like I hadn't just crossed a line I could never uncross. When Daniel appeared in the doorway, his hair messy, his face soft with sleep, my son shouted, "Uncle Dan, you stayed over." I laughed too loud, too fast, said something about the storm, said he crashed on the couch. They didn't question it, but I did. I looked at Daniel, really looked, and in that moment, I didn't feel joy or peace or love. I felt regret, not because I didn't want him, but because I had no idea what came next. I had spent so long holding everything together, trying to be strong, trying to be good, and in one night, I had undone it all. He looked at me like he was waiting for a sign, a word, anything, but I had nothing to give him. Nothing but silence and the growing weight in my chest. I avoided him for days. I couldn't answer his calls, couldn't read his messages, couldn't even look at the room where it happened. Everything reminded me. The blanket we'd shared, the wine glasses still sitting in the sink, the flickering shadows on the walls. I tried to pretend it hadn't happened, tried to carry on like I always did, make breakfast, fold laundry, kiss scraped knees. But I wasn't okay. I couldn't look at myself in the mirror without flinching. I couldn't sleep without hearing Mark's voice in the back of my mind. Soft, distant, disappointed. The guilt clung to me like a second skin. I kept wondering what Mark would think, if he would have seen this coming, if deep down he knew I had felt alone long before he left this world. But none of that mattered now, because what I'd done couldn't be undone. The kids noticed it first. I was quieter, edgier, distracted. One afternoon, I was packing their lunches when my daughter looked up at me and asked out of nowhere, "Is Uncle Dan going to be our new daddy?" I froze. The knife slipped from my hand and clattered onto the counter. I turned to her, smiling too quickly, too wide. "No, sweetie," I said, voice shaking. "Uncle Dan's just a friend." She nodded, went back to her coloring, but my hands wouldn't stop trembling. That night, I stood in the hallway staring at our wedding photo. Mark was smiling, eyes crinkled, hands around my waist, completely unaware of everything that would one day fall apart. I whispered to him like he could hear me. "I didn't mean for this to happen." And the worst part? I wasn't even sure that was true, because part of me had wanted it, had needed it, and that was what tore me up the most. Then Daniel showed up again. No warning, just knocked on the door one evening like nothing had changed. I opened it before I could think. Heart pounding, mind racing. He looked at me, eyes full of hope, confusion, something deeper I wasn't ready to name. "Can we talk?" he asked. I stepped outside, closing the door gently behind me. We stood on the porch under the soft glow of the porch light, the air thick between us. "I've been trying to give you space," he said, "but I need to know where we stand." I couldn't look at him. I stared at the cracks in the wood beneath our feet. "Daniel," I started, voice cracking that night. "It can't happen again." He was quiet, too quiet. Then he let out a slow breath, nodded once, and said, "So, that's it." I nodded. His eyes glistened, but he didn't cry. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, rocking slightly like he was trying to keep himself grounded. "You think this was a mistake?" he said, voice soft but sharp. "I think it was fate." And then he turned, walked down the steps, disappeared into the night without looking back. I stood there long after he left, arms wrapped around myself, trying to breathe through the ache. Because as much as I want to feel like I did the right thing, all I felt was emptiness. The days after Daniel left felt like standing still while the world kept moving around me. I went through the motions, woke the kids up, packed lunches, answered emails, smiled at neighbors. But inside, I was unraveling quietly. Every quiet moment, every stretch of silence after the kids went to bed became a space I filled with questions I didn't want to answer. Was what I felt for Daniel real? Was his love genuine? Or did it grow in the cracks of my grief? Was he offering comfort? Or had he just waited until the door opened? And me, was I mourning my husband or just mourning the version of myself I lost somewhere along the way? Because here's what no one tells you. Grief isn't always clean. It doesn't follow rules. It doesn't wait for your heart to be ready before it collides with someone else's. There were moments, especially late at night, when I convinced myself I had betrayed Mark, that I had taken something sacred and let it slip through my fingers, that I had crossed a line that love doesn't come back from. But then there were other moments when I looked at myself in the mirror and saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. A woman, not just a widow, not just a mother, a woman with needs, with feelings, with a pulse. I found myself sitting on the living room floor one evening, sifting through a box of old photographs, our wedding, vacations, holidays, little moments that once felt so big. I studied Mark's smile, the way he used to look at me when the world was still simple. I tried to remember the last time he touched me like I mattered, the last time he asked how I was feeling, the last time he saw me, not just as the mother of his kids, but as the woman he married. And I couldn't. That truth sat heavy on my chest. So I called my therapist, someone I hadn't spoken to in months, someone who had been gently waiting for me to come back. I sat in her office, hands folded tightly in my lap, and said, "I slept with someone his best friend." She didn't flinch. She didn't judge. She just asked, "Why do you think you did it?" And for a long time, I couldn't answer. But eventually, the words came. I was lonely. I felt invisible. I needed to be wanted, to be touched, to be reminded that I'm still here. She nodded and then said something that stuck with me. Maybe healing isn't about forgetting the past. Maybe it's about forgiving yourself enough to move forward. That night, I went home and pulled out a notebook, sat at the kitchen table long after the kids had gone to sleep, lit a candle, and wrote Mark a letter I'll never send. "Mark, you were my first home, my safe place, my best friend, and I love you more than I ever knew how to say while you were here. But somewhere along the way, we stopped reaching for each other. Maybe we both did. Maybe I stopped trying because I thought I wasn't worth the effort anymore. Maybe you stopped trying because you thought I'd always be there, and then you were gone. I have carried you in every breath since. I have tried to raise our children with pieces of the love you gave me. I have mourned you 1,000 different ways. Some I can't even explain. But I need to tell you something I never had the courage to say while you were alive. I felt alone. I felt like I disappeared in your presence long before I disappeared in your absence. And when Daniel saw me, I broke. I know what I did, and I know it changed everything, but I need you to understand it didn't come from a place of betrayal. It came from a place of longing, of aching, of needing to feel human again. I don't know if you'd forgive me. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive myself, but I'm trying. I will always love you, but I'm learning to love me, too. And maybe that's where healing really begins. I folded the letter, slipped it into the drawer next to the stove, the same drawer that holds batteries and old receipts and pieces of life we keep just in case. And I sat there staring at the candle until it burned low, not sure if I'd done the right thing, not sure where this would lead. But for the first time in a long time, I felt honest. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. If you've ever had to choose between grief and healing, between the weight of memory and the fragile hope of something new, then maybe you understand what I went through. Maybe you've stood at that same edge where love and loss overlap, where the past holds you tight while the future whispers something softer. Maybe you felt that kind of loneliness, the kind that creeps in even when the house is full, the kind that doesn't leave when the casseroles stop coming, the kind that makes you question if you'll ever be touched again, not just physically, but deeply seen. So I want to ask you something. What would you have done if you were me? Would you have opened the door, let someone in, let yourself feel again? Or would you have kept pretending, smiling through the ache, choosing loyalty over life, silence over self? Was I wrong or just human? I don't know the answer. Maybe there isn't one. Maybe that's the point. But if any part of the story reached a part of you that you've tried to keep buried, if you've ever loved, lost, and longed for something you never named for, then please share your thoughts in the comments. I'll be reading and I'll be listening. Because stories like these, they're not just mine, they're ours, woven into the quiet corners of everyday life, where we carry heartbreak and healing in the same breath. So if you're still here, thank you, really. And if you want more stories like this, real ones, messy ones, human ones, please like this video, subscribe to Daily Story 68, and turn on the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Because the truth is, grief makes the world blurry. And in that blur, we sometimes reach for comfort, even if it costs us clarity. Love, lost, loyalty. They don't live in separate boxes. Sometimes they collide. And when they do, all we can do is try to survive the wreckage with our humanity intact. You're not alone in your questions. You're not broken for wanting more. You're not bad for choosing yourself. Your story matters. Even the messy parts. Especially the messy parts.